So the next thing I invite you to consider is, how do we actually identify the karmic patterns? Because honestly, the karmic patterns are kind of everywhere. It's hard for you to get away from them in a general sense. And so most of the kinds of karmic patterns that we're going to be paying attention to, at least at first, are the ones that feel uncomfortable to us. But we also have karmic patterns around really strong desires that we might have. Even sometimes the strong passions, the one that I sort of think of as kind of a classic strong karmic desire might be, to become the next American Idol. There can just be like this just incredible, intense desire and drive in people who are auditioning to want to be that next person, to want to be that next thing. And that's also coming from a karmic place. It's a desire. And in most cases, we would probably recognize it as being, a positive thing of, being confident about ourselves or wanting to express our artistic nature. We might also if you ever watched any of the auditions from, American Idol, especially back in the early days, where they would show a lot of people who were really not talented and almost kind of mock them and make fun of them. We might also kind of look at that karmic desire as being almost delusional. Like, here's this person who does not seem to have the talent to be able to sing at all, but are convinced that they are the next superstar. They're completely unaware of what's actually coming out of them. And I'm not intending to do that in a way of mocking them, but I'm also just sort of pointing out what their inner psychological state is. There's a lack of self-awareness around what it is that they're actually able to do in terms of their talent. And so what we're going to be usually focusing on is the kinds of emotional reactions and maybe some of the mental patterns and reactions that are happening and the behaviors. But one of the quick litmus tests to understand if something is a karmic pattern is karma that's showing up that is beneficial to be addressed, especially, is to recognize, if it's causing, problems for you. Are you making choices that take you away from your happiness would be one thing. But the most effective way of understanding if it's karma is that anything that actually has an emotional charge within you, whether that's desire, fear, aversion, attachment, but anything that creates an emotional charge inside of you, anytime you're in an experience and there's a triggered emotion of some kind, then that usually is going to be a result of a karmic pattern. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're not trying to fight against ourselves. We're not making ourselves wrong. And so we're also not wanting to judge the karmic patterns as being good or bad to the best of our ability. Our mind will still probably judge them sometimes. That's part of the process here. But we're wanting instead to start being curious and just recognize, like, oh, that thing happened and there was this, flood of anxiety that came into me, or, whatever the experience may be, to start being curious about what's actually happening. But it's those moments, especially the intense moments, that are going to be most obvious at first. And as things progress, there are actually much more subtle layers of karmic patterns that will come up. But this is usually the first layer that really needs to be addressed through the process. And so the other part of it is the recurring issue, because people will get really frustrated. They might actually be doing good healing work, but they're frustrated by the fact that the pattern shows back up, that they feel like, I did all this work and now here it is again. And so from that perspective, we want to understand the healing process as well. And so I like to talk about the healing process from this as understanding that there are layers of karma. We didn't just come into this lifetime with, this bundle of karma and that's all we ever get. Everything that we've done since we were born has modified our bundles of karma. We have created new karmas and fears and aversions. We've created new desires and attachments. Maybe some of the things that we came into, we're no longer, so attached to. We might have been attached to a particular toy when we were a child, but we're not probably all still running around playing with fire trucks and dolls or whatever it may be. So there's an evolution of how these things end up expressing themselves. And so the reality then is that we came in with a particular set of karmas, and then each experience that we've had has added kind of another layer of karma on top of that, or modified something a little bit and then added a layer. And so over the course of what we could argue as being lifetimes, but at least within this lifetime, there have been multiple layers of karma. And I kind of start to think of it like an onion that's been building up. of each experience that we have creates another layer potentially. And so after we've gotten to 30, 40, 50, 60 years, wherever we may be, we have all of these layers that are built up. And so in most practical senses, we can really only kind of deal with the layer that's on the outer surface. And so when we come across a particular pattern, it's the thing that's kind of happening in the present moment. It's the program that's running. And even when we do find effective healing techniques to purify this karma and remove that layer, to dissolve the karma, to let it go away, there's the potential that a similar kind of karmic pattern may exist at some of the layers that are deeper. And so we eventually might come around and have a similar kind of experience show up. And so that's one of the things that happens that is a natural part of the process. And so to think that we are going to heal it once and it's all going to go away is actually an unrealistic expectation. It can happen. There are times that are really just huge shift happens and it's done. But other times there's going to be more of a process. And so I think it's better to think about the layers of the onion and recognize we might hit something similar as we go through it.